the Ticats Audio Network. This is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
14 weeks are behind us with 7 to go in the CFL's regular season, but has the Grey Cup already been claimed? Honestly, life without Rourke has become very rocky for the BC Lions, and is there a connection between the commissioner of the league and the words cancel culture? This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm your tour guide, Bubba O'Neil. Well, should we dub this week's edition of the CFL This Week as the sound of the CFL? I'll tell you why, folks, because look at these three individuals that we have here. They are all the play-by-play voices of particular teams in the league. Let's start off from west to east. And well, he's the voice of the BC Lions from AM 730. Why don't you say hi to Bob, the Moj Marjanovich?
Morning, Bubba.
Good to hear from you, folks. It's been certainly a wild week. And of course, we look at the Saskatchewan Roughriders and what a year it has been out in Regina for Michael Ball. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Bubba. I appreciate it.
And well, Ticat fans, what can we say about what's going on in the Steel Town City? And he's having a great sophomore season. Let's welcome RJ Broadhead.
Thank you, Bubba. Big 6 games ahead coming off a bye week, so it should be a fun finish. We'll see.
Can we say the words must win?
I've been saying it for weeks, months.
Hey, all I know is I'm just looking at RJ's hair, and I know why myself and Ballsy have always been in radio. Right? So.
Got a Peyton Manning 5 head. Show an IMAX movie on my forehead. Yeah.
All right, guys, let's talk with something that's been really discussed all around the league and for the last week or so. Last week, the Rough Riders released Garrett Marino, the much talked about controversial defensive end. On the same day, CFL Commissioner Randy Ambrosie reportedly sends out a memo kind of reminding teams that he can refuse to register any player contract for any reason deemed valid. Now, obviously, if we're going to link the two between Marino and the memo, I'll start with you, Ballsy. You're closest to the situation. Did the commissioner cross a line of any sort?
I don't want to be canceled too, so I don't know what I say here. Usually I say what I want. The Riders say that that the league didn't force them into the move, but they're not going to tell you that. Every player I've talked to, both on the record and off the record, said Garrett Marino is a good dude. We are not a better football team because he's gone. So you decide if he was forced out the door. I will say this. Can we all be friends after this? Are we all going to be friends after this? Okay. I'm going to say something that is obviously not going to go over well in Hamilton. There's a guy playing for the Tiger Cats that wears number 21. And you could say, because I brought this up with Farhan Lalji, he said, well, you can't compare. That's 3 years ago. Yes, you can. Because it's the exact, the hit that broke the camel's back, so to speak, was the hit on Zach Collaros, which was a football play. It wasn't a dirty play. He didn't hit him high and he didn't hit him low. Simone Lawrence knocked Zach Collaros and turned his head into a bowl of soup against the Riders back in 2019, and nobody was canceling him. Nobody was saying, I can revoke any contract with him. So yes, there is a little bit of chicanery and skullduggery. I'm not happy about it. A lot of Riders aren't happy about it. The team's looking to move on, though. They didn't move on very well against Winnipeg. They could have used Garrett Marino, believe me, in the Labor Day rematch.
RJ, do you choose to defend number 21?
Well, first of all, Michael should be in politics because a great deflection on the answer. There's a big difference between Simone Lawrence's play and Garrett Marino's play. One guy's probably going to be a Hall of Famer. The other guy is probably never going to play another game in the league. What did Marino have this year? 8 games, 9 tackles, and a sack. That's a game for Jovan Santos Knox. So there has to be some respect. You get suspended, you come back, you get fined, you have a bye week, you do a questionable hit. He's just not a good enough player to accept that and allow that to keep happening. And maybe the Riders are saying that, Michael, that they're not a better team without him. But I think around the league, there's a lot of other players who are not fans of Garrett Marino. Jeremiah Masoli, one of the most liked guys, excellent quarterback. Who knows where Ottawa would have been if he didn't get injured with that tackle. So I don't know. There's risk reward. If you're a superstar and you're getting fined and suspended and giving cheap shots, but you're contributing to victories and helping the team win, maybe you can overlook some of that. But I don't really see Garrett Marino has contributed to a ton of victories for the Riders.
But I'll let Moj jump in here. I'm sorry for dominating this, but I am close to it. Come on. Just because you're a superstar, with all due respect, RJ, doesn't mean you can take a guy's head out and then you'll say, well, he learned his lesson. No, he didn't, because he went after Cody in week 1. Same type of deal. So no, I'm not buying that at all. You can't have, listen, one is a superstar and one isn't. I'll agree with you, but you can't have pick and choose justice based on how good you think a guy is. That is a load of crap, in my opinion.
Bob, Moj, what was the letter about? Like, I'm still kind of trying to clarify what that was all about.
You know, it was kind of disappointing, to be honest. And the reason why is, well, I'll give you a perfect example. You guys got significant others, right? You got wives, girlfriends, whatever, mistresses in some cases. But you know, when you kind of state the obvious to them and they look at you and they just give you basically like, you know, you get reamed out because it's so obvious that they feel insulted. I think, you know, with the CFL, that's the way I kind of look at it. I think the GMs in this league are smart enough to realize whether or not Garrett Marino is going to be an asset to their football team or whether he's going to be a negative to their football team. I don't think they need a memo from Randy Ambrosie telling them that this guy's offside. I mean, they know that. I think we can all agree maybe there's only one coach in the league that would probably sign Garrett Marino, and he resides in Edmonton. But in terms of the memo, I wasn't a fan of it. I really wasn't. I think GMs and coaches in this league should be smart enough to figure it out. And I kind of agree with RJ in the sense that, you know, it's all about pros and cons. We see it all the time in any sport. Teams will put up with someone who is just like, you know, all a headache, but if he can contribute to them winning, they'll keep him around. I think the best quote I heard was one time we talked to Jimmy Johnson when we were down at Radio Row. And he said, I treat my team as a business. He said, if you're my number 1 sales guy and you come in 15 minutes late, I don't really care. But if you're my number 10 sales guy and you're showing up 15 minutes later or 30 minutes late, you're like 10 out of 10 and you're the guy showing up late, because I'm getting rid of you, right? And that's the bottom line. The bottom line is, are you a positive or are you a negative? And for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, they put up with Simone Lawrence because he's a huge positive, or the pros outweigh the cons. And I think in Saskatchewan, the cons probably started to outweigh the pros.
Ballsy, answer this first. Is Garrett Marino a good player?
Yes, he's a good player.
He's a good player.
He's not Simone Lawrence. I agree with RJ Broadhead for sure. By the way, RJ, I like you. I didn't say you're a load of crap. I don't like I don't like pick and choose justice. That's what I don't like. Yes, he's a good player, Bubba. Of course he's a good player. He is a disturber. The Riders noticed. Don't kid yourself. Now, they were sick, and I say throw this last game out the window. Rider fans, the Riders noticed Garrett Marino not being in the middle of that defense. They were pushing the Riders around big time in that game on Saturday.
What, to you, Ballsy, what did that letter mean?
What that letter meant to me was, I can tell you who can play and who can't play, in my opinion. It's like, you can't have pick and choose justice. And that's where I get mad. Just because a guy's an all-star, he can't fly around and knock guys' heads off like he's been doing time and time again. And because a guy has 8 tackles and 1 quarterback sack and has had a history of hitting guys and taking penalties. I'm not defending what he did to Masoli at all. But you can't have pick and choose justice. Like Moj said, let them decide who can play and can't play within reason.
I think the one thing that really hurts Garrett Marino was what he did after the Masoli sack. I think that really, really put him in a bad light. You can talk about, you know, how great of a guy is and the players like him, this and that, but when you see that type of behavior after a player is injured on the field and, you know, he's saying that he didn't see it, I'm not buying it. But to me, that is something that really, really hurt Garrett Marino. And I don't think his apology came across that well either. And, you know, he might have been honest, he might have been truthful, but it just didn't come across well.
And I think I should chime in on Michael's pick and choose justice. Garrett Marino continually offended even after he was suspended. When was the last time Simone Lawrence was suspended? You bring up Simone, he doesn't get suspended all the time. He doesn't get fined all the time. this is a player in Marino who was getting suspended and fined. And I think the letter is basically saying we don't want that kind of player in our league. You can get a guy who has 9 tackles and 1 sack off your practice roster. You don't need to sign a guy who's trying to actually injure other players. There is a code in the league too.
RJ, you spent a long time covering the National Hockey League, and we see guys in that league blow it, we'll say, but continually get opportunities. I mean, I'll just defend Garrett Marino here. Is it not he's a free agent. Is it not his option to be able to sign with another team without the sort of overcoming of the commissioner?
Sure. Yeah. But he's kind of made his own bed, right? It's like Moj said, it's up to other general managers, and the commissioners maybe done a bit of a reminder. And I think that was more so years ago, Bubba, where some of the NHL players would go after knees or do cheap shots. They've taken a lot of that out of the game. So it's tough to really do a comparison to what we're seeing here with Garrett Marino. I'd be fascinated and watch the Tiger Cats wind up signing him, and I'll be best friends with him. I'll be saying, what a great signing.
Bob, final thought to you.
Well, I think it's unfortunate because you want to give somebody the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. And I guess kind of the sad part about it was when he did come back, I mean, you saw that shot on Whitehead that just missed. You saw the shot with Collaros. I mean, the penalty against Godber when he hit him when the ball wasn't snapped during that illegal procedure. So that's the concern, because he's a good football player. I mean, he can probably help it. I know he could help a team, but that's the thing. I mean, it's such a fine line between playing with all that aggression and that edge and then not crossing it. And maybe he's still in the phase of his career where he's trying to learn that.
All right, guys, let's move on. Hey, you talked about the Roughriders. I mean, apparently there was some illness, players puking. Not a good situation in the locker room, but the Roughriders were pretty much dismantled by the Bombers after a real close contest on Labor Day. So not much of a banjo bowl, but I'll turn it to in terms of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Michael. Are we on the verge of kind of a boring end of the season here? Like, has the Grey Cup already been etched to the Bombers and Zach Collaros?
Take that Labor Day rematch and throw it out the window. I was there. There are 25 guys, 15 players, and about 10 front office staff. Craig Dickinson ran to the washroom 12 times in the middle of the night. Here's a story for you. Here's a CFL story for you. Craig Reynolds ignored Craig Dickinson's call. He missed it, and he's like, oh, I'll make my omelets or whatever. This is Saturday morning. Finally answers the phone, said, hey, you got to get us some guys here. They picked up Diego Alatorre Montoya from the dorm along with Blaze Brown. Gave Blaze Brown 2 Egg McMuffin sandwiches. Craig Reynolds drove 140, the team president drove 140 kilometers an hour to Winnipeg. They arrived at 4:09, 9 minutes after kickoff. Dude ate 2 McMuffin sandwiches. We should get a sponsorship on this show. Walked onto the field and played. Didn't stretch, played. These guys were sick, throwing up on the plane on the way home. So I'd take that game and throw it out the window. Long about way to get to your answer. This season is long from over. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers are a very good football team, but they're also a very beatable football team. The Rough Riders gave them that Labor Day game. They didn't lose it. They gave it away. And the Riders, you know the funny thing? The Riders cut Garrett Marino. He didn't cost them that game. You know who cost them that game? Jason Moss with a couple of play calls at the end, and Duke Williams in plain clothes on the sidelines. He cost them the game, not Garrett Marino. So, no, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are very beatable.
Moj, you've seen that team a couple of times and had some real close contests, especially when Rourke was playing. Is it a fait accompli?
No, it's a beatable team. And I say that because you look at all the games, guys, that they've won this year that could have gone either way. I don't know how many wins they have, one score or less. I didn't dig that up, but
ask Calgary.
Yeah, I want to say it's probably 4 or 5 games maybe that they've won by a touchdown or less. So no, this team is beatable. It just seems like whenever they need to find a way to win, they do, or they just capitalize on another team making a mistake. So I just find it extremely difficult for a team to win 3 championships in a row I just think that sooner or later, that bounce or that break in a tight football game is not going to go their way. And whether it's the Western Final, whether it's the Grey Cup, I mean, look at last year. Hamilton, they got it down to the goal line. Put the ball in the end zone. Hello, game over. No, Winnipeg somehow, some way squeaks out of there, gets in overtime, and winds up winning another Grey Cup. So, yeah, it's just like I said, they just somehow, some way find a way to win. But sooner or later, you just can't go like 6-0 or 6-1 in games that are decided by 7 points or less.
RJ, the Bombers are checking into Steeltown this Saturday. How are you feeling about this contest?
Well, it's into a must-win category for the Tiger Cats and maybe a bonus for the Tiger Cats. We'll see, but the Bombers are in a pretty good spot. They've clinched a playoff spot, so maybe their fire won't be as burn as hot as the Tiger Cats. We'll have to see what happens on Saturday. But I agree with Moj. There's been so many games for Winnipeg. You watch them and think, okay, this isn't going to go well. Even the first two games against Ottawa. Ottawa had better numbers, but didn't win those games. And it works both ways. The good teams find a way to win, and the teams that struggle sometimes find a way to lose. So the Bombers have won a ton of close games, and it's great. Take your first place, take your bye, go for your third straight championship. But I think we've got one of the most exciting finishes in the CFL in a long time. BC Calgary, what a battle for second place in home field, and ballsy, the Riders still have a shot there. The crossover is likely, but you never know. And is fourth place the best spot to be in for the West Division? Go over to the East. It's not supposed to be as good, but the playoffs in the East are exciting too. Toronto should be fine. Montreal looks good. They're not so good. Hamilton has 6 games to salvage their season. Ottawa seems to be coming on a little bit. So yes, Winnipeg is way ahead in the standings, but probably on the field, not significantly better than a whole lot of teams. So I think when the playoffs roll around, it's going to be exciting.
All right, guys, any given Sunday, well, we all know the saying when it comes to not necessarily the National Football League, it could be any brand of football, that any team could beat any day on any team on any day. I'll ask you, I'll go around the horn here quickly on this as we close up this topic. Michael, who is the closest right now? Who's the top contender? And I would believe it's coming from the West to knock off the Bombers.
Calgary Stampeders. And with all due respect to BC, I had 4 weeks ago, I had the Riders and the BC Lions in the Grey Cup. Riders winning the crossover. I'm still sticking with the Roughriders. I know I sound like a homer, but the Saskatchewan Roughriders are getting healthy on offense. Their offensive line, believe it or not, was not too bad against Winnipeg. Everything else went to you-know-what. I got Calgary knocking off Winnipeg, and if I'm BC or Saskatchewan, I want to finish 4th and go East. That's my opinion.
Moj?
I'd say Calgary. And I got to pat myself on the back a little bit because Julio and I were doing a game this year, and we did an out-of-town scoreboard during the course of the broadcast, and I just blurted out, I said, that will be Jake Mayer's team by the end of the year. It was Jake Mayer's team within probably like 3-4 weeks after that. I mean, Bo Levi Mitchell, I'm sorry, compared to Jake Mayer, I think that's probably the best thing that happened in the Calgary Stampeders is getting Jake Mayer being the regular quarterback. Now, how's he going to handle the pressure of the playoffs or Grey Cup? I don't know. But for me, it starts with the quarterbacking position. And right now, the BC Lions, as good as they are at every position except quarterback, I mean, it's hindering them. You saw what happened in Montreal. I mean, they were completely misfiring. You know, now you're asking your defense to play lights out. The other thing with the Lions, too, is their special teams issues were kind of masked by Nathan Rourke and what he could do. But now that's coming to the forefront, and it's really hurting this team. So, you know, when I look at the teams around the league, to me, it's the Calgary Stampeders, and probably the biggest reason why is what they have a quarterback in Jake Mayer.
RJ out east, could Toronto beat Winnipeg? They actually had a real tight contest earlier this year.
They did. And I just have to say, if the Riders guy goes with Calgary and the Lions guy goes with Calgary, in the West, I would go Calgary too. Those games against Winnipeg were great. Playoff atmosphere. But in the East, Toronto kind of fits into the Winnipeg category a little bit. They find a way to win. A lot of times, statistically, you look at it afterwards and how are they even in this game? But they pull out those victories. They just need to find a way to do it in the playoffs. I think Toronto is the team in the East right now that would have the best chance to beat Winnipeg.
Let's go right to you on this, Moj, because again, you were right there at calling the game. Brief appearance in the first quarter by newly acquired quarterback Vernon Adams Jr., Antonio Pipkin, just seemingly inefficient. The Lions fall 31-10 to the Alouettes. It was strange, though, because VA came into the game and then was taken out, replaced by Pipkin again, and we never saw VA again. I would like to presume that this could be his team. Why did Rick Campbell pull him and not put him back in? What was that about?
Well, first off, he's limited in terms of what he knows with the offense. So the package is limited with Vernon Adams. But I think that there's an old expression that I once heard, and not all experience is good experience, right? And I think had they allowed Adams to go in there and try to execute an offense that he was still not comfortable with, that it probably would have gave him a negative experience, or probably may have affected his confidence. I just think they want to get him up to speed in terms of what they're doing offensively before they give him a legitimate shot at quarterback. I mean, Rick Campbell said after the game that he told us before the game it was in flux. They didn't know how the quarterbacking situation was going to play out as more of a situation of feel. And they felt that they started getting something out of Pipkin in the second half, and they did to an extent, but turnovers and missed opportunities really hurt them to get them back in the football game. But, getting back to VA, I just think they didn't play him because of the fact they didn't want him to go in there and kind of be lost in a sense. If he knew the offense, yeah, you put him in there and get him those reps. But the fact that he's not comfortable with the offense, I just think they didn't think it was a valuable enough experience to get him in there and get him more reps.
RJ, were you surprised?
First of all, Moj, what was it, a little over a week that Vernon Adams had been with the Lions?
Yeah, he came in during the bye week. So, yeah, he came in that weekend. I want to say Friday or Saturday. So it's been about a week or so, yes.
So to answer your question, Bob, I wasn't surprised. Sometimes you learn more from watching from the sidelines, especially when you're new to a team. And it was a great point by Modes that he just can't know the offense yet. And realistically, playing against Montreal probably knew him a lot better than he knew the BC Lions offense. So sure. It was maybe good to give him a few reps, but not give him a bad experience. So one thing I found about football, and it's a pro and a con, I guess, but it's so easy to second guess. You have so much time. That's where the armchair quarterback, we use that term in all sports, but it definitely comes from football because coaches have to make a split-second decision. And if it's the right decision, and we know it's the right decision because we can see it play out, all fans would say, I would have made that decision too. But when it's the wrong decision because it didn't pan out, fans have a solution that what they would have done in that situation. Of course, BC didn't win the game. Vernon Adams new to the team. I think it was probably the right move. Montreal would have a very good book on Vernon Adams, what he's good at and what they would like to force him into. So I'm sure we'll see Vernon Adams down the road, but that first game, it was probably the right decision.
Ballsy, you check me on this one. I think VA, he started his career as a Rider, did he not?
He was with the Roughriders. Yep. Third string guy. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, do you see him as the guy in Vancouver?
No. I mean, he's a nice backup plan. I mean, nobody should be the guy over Nathan Rourke. He's the MOP of the league, and he's showing it now by being hurt. I hear all this talk about Zach Collaros, and Zach is having a great year. One of the best reclamation stories in the history of North American professional sports, okay? I got Rider fans. Why didn't we keep him? Well, why didn't Toronto keep him? You know what I mean? He's in Winnipeg kicking butt now, 24-3 as a starter. Nobody saw that coming, including the Blue Bombers. But no, I mean, I don't know how I feel about Vernon Adams, to be honest with you. Right now in BC, they have it's like the most beautiful sports car you could ever have sitting on the driveway, and nobody knows how to drive it or comfortable enough to drive it. Like, it's a great team, but it's like, yeah, I got a Ferrari, but I don't know how to drive a Standard. I have no idea. Somebody show me. I'm not ready. I just stalled it 3 times getting out of the driveway. That's how I feel with the BC Lions right now. And one last comment, because both those guys hit it perfectly, Bob and RJ. Antonio Pipkin leaves Montreal to go to BC to get away from Vernon Adams, and then he can't get away from him. Vernon Adams goes out there. And I got to say this. Listen, he's a professional athlete. I've never been a professional athlete. But Antonio Pipkin is not a quarterback in the CFL. That experiment is done. I'm sorry. I watched that thing and I watched it. I'm like, how the heck is this guy still in the league? I'm sorry. Just the way that I feel.
Be honest, Moj.
Oh, I
Respond.
agree with Ballsy. I mean, what you see in Antonio Pipkin is what you get. He's been in the league for 5 years, right? I mean, if he hasn't seized the opportunity by now, and he's had opportunities, what makes you think that he's just going to come into BC and all of a sudden turn into an elite CFL quarterback? I mean, like I said, to me, he's a journeyman quarterback who can come in and, finish a game or provide you depth in terms of practice numbers. But it's just, I'm sorry. And then with Vernon Adams, guys, the funny thing is when he came to BC, everybody was clamoring, oh, they got to get Vernon Adams. They got to get Vernon Adams. Guys, Vernon Adams was benched in Montreal. And anybody wants to play the Danny Machocha card, he was benched by Kahari Jones, not Danny Machocha, right? So, it was strange here in BC. Everyone was clamoring for Adams, and it's not the be-all, end-all, right? And I think Ballsy makes a great point in terms of the most outstanding player. If you're looking at the most outstanding player, or the most valuable player to his team, if we use a hockey terminology here that they use for the Hart Trophy that they never abide by, take Collaros out of Winnipeg, and do you think they have as big of a drop as BC does without Nathan Rourke in the lineup, right? So, I just think, and you're laughing. I was laughing when we were talking about the Ferrari because we used that analogy during the course of the game the other night. It's, you got all these great receivers, right? I mean, you got Burnham and you got Hatcher and Rhymes, and you just can't get them the ball. And you can see, and Whitehead, and you can see the frustration sometimes in the games with these guys, right? Because they're so used to like Rourke being on point, and all of a sudden now balls are thrown behind. I mean, that interception by Nafis Lyon, we're still trying to figure out who he's thrown to, right? Because there's nobody like in the same time zone. So it's tough, but it is what it is, and the Lions are going to have to figure out a way to move forward.
Last one, Moj, to you on that. I mean, honest here. I mean, this was a team that had built up a good amount of equity with Rourke. Where is this team going to finish when we hit the playoffs?
What are they at? 8 wins now?
Yep.
I think if they can play 500 for the rest of the year, that'll be a gift. I really think this team is in trouble unless they figure out their quarterbacking situation. If we see more of what we saw against the Alouettes and against Saskatchewan, this team's it's in trouble. Like I still think they'll make the playoffs, but this is a team I think it's a sub 500 team without Nathan Rourke in the lineup. I hate to say it, but right now that's the evidence that's presented to me.
They're the 2014 Saskatchewan Roughriders when Darian Durant got hurt on that play-no play in Winnipeg in that game. They were looking to go back-to-back Grey Cups. They were 7-2. Durant gets hurt. Next year he blows his Achilles. That's how I feel about the BC Lions. They're a great team. They just got the worst injury you could ever get.
I will say this, and I'll give props to my cohort Julio Caravetta. When they didn't bring in a veteran backup in the offseason like a Trevor Harris, Julio's biggest concern was what happens if Nathan Rourke is ineffective? What are they going to do? Who are they going to turn to? And, Antonio Pipkin wasn't even around at that point, but that was Julio's biggest concern is if Nathan Rourke is ineffective, they better have a backup plan in place. Well, they rolled the dice. I mean, Rourke, they signed him. He's on a cheap contract. They put their money in other spots to kind of help their team because they really believed in Nathan Rourke, and that paid off for him. But, going back to Julio's point now, an injury has caused that situation at quarterback, and they don't have a suitable backup, right? So we'll see with Vernon Adams. We'll see what happens with Vernon moving down the road. But right now, I think the Lions' season hinges on Vernon Adams in the sense that if he can get up to speed and, at least just be a game manager and just get the football in the hands of those receivers and let them be playmakers, maybe something can happen. But right now, that's a big if.
Can't help this one. I'm a bit of a TV guy. That's what I do. And according to the football website, 3 Down Nation, Labor Day weekend, the ratings dropped some 16% from just last year, guys. RJ, should the league and maybe even TSN be a little concerned here?
So I always go back to being in school, and would you take 16% on an exam? you probably wouldn't be happy with that. So I don't think it's enough to worry about. And we forget, last year there were still COVID restrictions. You needed vaccine passports to go places, and people weren't traveling as much. So people were watching more TV. So I'm not really surprised that the ratings went down. There are some positives. The Winnipeg Saskatchewan game, first game this season to go over 700,000 viewers. I know that's down from the previous season, but there is a positive there. And Hamilton, Toronto, that wasn't a great game, especially for Ticats fans. Calgary, Edmonton, that was a predictable result. So being down 16%, I don't think it's a huge concern or a huge surprise, just because things have opened up so much more. And again, 16%. What is it, about 100,000 viewers per game? Yes, it would be nice to have, but I wouldn't be overly concerned if I were the league or TSN.
Ballsy?
Listen to radio. Listen to the Hamilton Tiger Cats audio network.
Yes.
Don't watch TV. I mean, I don't care. I will tell you this. I'm not trying to be dismissive. I will tell you this. The league and the TV, like, what are we doing here? We've got 9 teams in the league. We'd love to have 10. Hell, the commissioner thinks we'll get 12. I don't know how he figures that, but it'd be great. Okay. We've got 9 teams. Why did the Hamilton Tiger Cats and Toronto Argonauts play 4 out of 5 games? I'm not tuning in for that. I've already seen 3 of them, and the other 3 weren't very good. Let's be honest. Everybody thought Calgary and Edmonton was going to be an absolute you-know-what stomping, and it actually it was predictable, as RJ said, but it turned out to be a pretty good game. It was 23-16. It was last week's game that was a hunk of junk, and our game, people watch the Riders, the Bombers. It is the one, the cash cow for the weekend. So I'm not overreacting to that, but it's the league's fault. We got 9 teams. Let's break up the games a little bit. It isn't that hard to make a schedule. There aren't 30. Sorry, I'm getting fired up. I'm going to get canceled at the end of this thing.
Hey, I'll say this. Somebody explained to me the CFL schedule this year, guys. I mean, Balls, when we're in Saskatchewan, you got 6 back-to-backs? I mean, what's up with that? I mean, you look at all these back-to-back games, 3 games in 4 weeks. The Lions got Calgary now back-to-back. To me, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's tough enough, the fact that you always hear, oh, it's only a 9-team league. Well, you're playing everybody back-to-back. It makes it even worse from a fan's perspective. And I think the other thing, too, that comes into play, from a competition aspect, I'm not a big fan of it, because if you catch a team at the right time of year and you're playing a back-to-back, like Calgary is now with the Lions not having Nathan Rourke, well, I mean, they're getting a little bit of a break there compared to Saskatchewan, who did have to face Nathan Rourke on a couple of occasions, or Edmonton, or whoever else. So I just don't understand what's going on with the league. I can understand certain back-to-backs, but I mean, when you got teams playing 6 back-to-backs, it's ridiculous. I don't know who did the schedule this year, but I think they did it in crayon and 72 font.
You know what, RJ, to Moj's point here, what really upset me about the schedule, and yeah, I was a little mystified about facing the Argonauts. I mean, yeah, we all love a Battle of Ontario, Sens, Leafs, Ticats, Argos. I get that. I get it. But the way the schedule was set up, Hamilton fans, I'll extend it, fans in the Golden Horseshoe in Southern Ontario, had he been healthy, would not have an opportunity to see Nathan Rourke play. And he's an Oakville guy. It made no sense.
Yeah. The schedule is a little bit odd. The 4 games the Tiger Cats had in 5 weeks against the Argonauts, I'm sure Tiger Cats fans would have been saying it was great if they had a 1, 3, or 4, but it is a lot to play a team that much in that short amount of time. I talked to coaches, players. Nobody could remember ever having a schedule like that. And I think it was in one of the league's stats packs, and it was back in the 50s. I guess it did happen, but I certainly don't recall that. And none of the players or coaches did. So hey, Argos probably think it's great. You know, they won 3 or 4 and they're in a good spot. But yeah, it is a bit odd for sure. And it is nice to be able to see some of the star players, but you know, injuries change that, and that's an uncontrollable factor, to take a quote from Coach O.
Ballsy, what's the game of the week coming up?
Gee, I didn't even look at the schedule, to be honest with you. I'm looking at my own. Honestly, we've had so much going on here. Chris Jones is coming home for the first time since leaving Regina for Cleveland, and then went and pulled the shoot on the high school kids, and now it's back in the CFL. So I think we need to win this game. So honestly, not to be Homer centric, I'm just concentrated on this game, to be quite honest with you. We have to win this game, and it's a big weekend here in Saskatchewan. It's football weekend in Saskatchewan. So Friday we've got that game. Saturday we got the Thunder and the Hilltops, junior football powerhouses. The Thunder just went into Saskatoon and won in overtime, trying to stake claim to the PFC. And then the Huskies and the Rams, pair of 2-0 teams. We talk about Pipkin, and we watch a guy get chance after chance after chance after chance because he's got an American birth certificate. I encourage anybody that's watching this later when it's posted in Regina, in Saskatchewan, get to Mosaic Stadium and watch Mason Nias. Dude's from Regina, U of S Husky quarterback, Heck Crichton guy. He can throw it all over the field. I don't care if he's playing U Sports. I was in Nebraska watching my kid play a D1 game, and he's a better quarterback than I watched on the field that day. So, yes, it's going to be a great weekend. So, to answer your question, I'm just focused on Saskatchewan football weekend.
That's fine. And RJ, you got to smile at that. I know you got a little Saskatchewan blood in you. You're happy about that stuff.
Oh yeah. It's hey, they love their football in Saskatchewan. It's a passion for the longest time. When I was growing up, the Riders were the only professional team in the province, so people travel from all over the place. And quick story here, I had a little flashback to Saskatchewan on Labor Day Monday when I was heading to Hamilton. I was coming from what they call cottage country, just north of Toronto, and I stopped at a gas station, and there were a couple of guys from North Bay who were making the trip to Hamilton. It was 8:30 in the morning or something, making the trip to Hamilton. I had to look it up to see how far. So it was a 4-hour trip one way. I'm sure they probably aren't thrilled with the result, but I know they were having a good time. But that reminded me of so many times in Saskatchewan where people travel 4 hours one way, don't think twice about it, just to go to a Rider game and support the Riders. So it was a little flashback for me, Bubba, to the most intriguing game. I'll be a homer. It's got to be the Tiger Cats against Winnipeg. Hamilton needs to win. Now you look back at the last two Grey Cups, Winnipeg beat Hamilton, essentially ending the Tiger Cats season. And they might be able to do it again. If the Tiger Cats lose again on Saturday, it's going to be a real uphill climb for them to finish in the top two in the East Division, because logic says there will be a crossover. 4:00 Saturday, Ticats Audio Network, me and Luke Tasker, Bubba and Andy, Fan 2's pregame at 3:00. Saved you a little time there, Bubba, with the promo.
Mode, you're rolling your eyes. What do you like?
A little tan trivia, and that's what I'm calling the Tiger Cats Audio Network. A little tan trivia for you. It's actually RJ Broadhead, and he's from Gull Lake, Saskatchewan. Just a little known fact that RJ is from Gull Lake, and his name is Broadhead. Changed it to Broadhead for media purposes. I mean, for me, I think the big thing is it's obviously the Lions. I want to see if this team can compete against the Calgary Stampeders. If they lose, 31-10 or whatever the score may be, like they did this past weekend against Montreal, this team is built. It's strange because it started in training camp. It started before they were winning games, and the chemistry on this team and the culture around it was so much different from last year. And I think a lot of it probably had to do with Nathan being a quarterback. You always hear about young players rejuvenating older players, and I think with Michael Riley, as great as Michael is, Hall of Fame quarterback, Grey Cup champion. I just think with Mike there was kind of like Mike kind of was a little, I don't want to say detached from the team, but he was at a different level, right? Whereas Nathan is kind of more one of the guys, so to speak. And they've built this great culture and this great environment up, but now they're starting to go through some real tough adversity. And I want to see whether or not they still maintain that. Rick Campbell has talked about the fact that he's happy with the way his team is still competing and still battling given the circumstances, but there comes a point where, that currency erodes. So it's going to be an interesting stretch drive for the BC Lions. And I think to keep that currency in the bank, they have to be at least competitive. If they lose 31-10 again, all of a sudden now I'm starting to worry about this team heading down the stretch.
Just quickly there, Moj. O'Connor, is he that banged up or is it just not there?
Well, he was banged up, and apparently he still is banged up, even though he dressed against Montreal. I think they'd love to see O'Connor at quarterback because it solves a lot of ratio issues for him, right? I mean, this week they had to take Tim Bonner out of the lineup, and they were contemplating taking Philip Norman out at guard and replacing him with Andrew Pearson. They didn't feel comfortable with that. They just took Bonner out of the rotation. I mean, we saw when O'Connor came out of the game, they had to play David Mackey at running back because they couldn't have James Butler on the field, right? So, or it's Keon Hatcher being subbed by Jacob Scarfone. So in an ideal world, I think the Lions would love to see Michael O'Connor be the guy, but right now he just hasn't shown enough for them to, to be that guy. And I think you kind of saw hints of it even when Nathan was still healthy. I mean, there were games in which people were saying, why isn't O'Connor in? They're up 30 points or something. And they just never put Michael in. And I think, the fact that they go and get Vernon Adams is another testament probably to their lack of confidence with Michael O'Connor moving forward.
We're pretty gifted here on the Ticats Audio Network, and of course here the CFL This Week, that I got 3 guys that have called all the action. So I would be remiss if I did not ask this question. Ballsy, give me your call of the year so far.
Oh God.
What's the one that
yeah, probably, who's been Jeremy O'Day's been under a lot of fire here, and maybe rightfully so, but to trade a late round draft pick for a guy that couldn't get on the Alouettes roster, Mario Alford, he has ran 2 kickoffs back for touchdowns and 1 missed field goal. It was probably the 112-yard missed field goal at the end of the first half against the Toronto Argonauts in the second half of that home-and-home series when the Riders had 10 guys out of the lineup because of COVID, and Jake Dolegala was starting at quarterback, and he ran it back 112 yards. And at that point, we were winning at halftime 17-11. It went downhill after that, but that was probably my call. Hey, and one thing, I've said this before. I like what you guys are doing here with the Ticats Audio Network. I've listened to RJ do the games, does a great job. Of course, I listen to Moj for years, do the games. So good job on you guys for what you do and bring to the league. As much as we're against each other, we're all together in it too. And I think that's the thing I love most about the CFL.
Well, I mean, in our pregame show, we have that segment, Speaking with the Enemy, and I know I say, hey, we're the enemy for the little bit there, but we can always talk a little football there, which I think it is always fun. And I think to your point there, Balls, it really is, I think, the way of the future. I mean, TV is just not what it used to be. TV, radio, you need different streams and different ways to show off your product. And yeah, I agree with you. I mean, when I joined on board here, I thought this was just something that was just necessary in today's medium. Bob, your call. I mean, there was so many exciting moments when Rourke was playing. What's the one that sticks out for you?
Well, first off, I'll agree with Ballsy in terms of what you guys are doing in Hamilton. It's a great job. And, guys, it's simple as this. When the tide comes in, all the boats in the harbor rise, right? So it's good for the league in terms of all around what you guys are doing and setting a precedent. I mean, to me, probably the game in Calgary. I mean, there's so much emotion in that comeback, and probably any of the calls in the fourth quarter, but the one where they hit Whitehead that puts them in the field goal range because, at that point, they've won the game with Sean White coming out. So that was such an emotional game. I mean, we've all done games that are stinkers. Hello, last Friday night in Montreal, where you just don't have that energy. But when you get a really close football game and a game with a lot of swings and emotion, I mean, we all feed off of it as play-by-play guys as well. So for me, it was the Calgary game and probably the catch by Whitehead that puts him in field goal position.
RJ, what sticks out for you?
Well, first of all, thank you, Michael and Bob, for the kind words. It over 25 years in the media business for me, the sports media business, and Ticats Audio Network has been some of the most fun I've had. It's just a great group. There's a lot of freedom and it's fun. We just laugh all day. It's been fantastic, and I wouldn't be surprised to see more teams go along this avenue. As far as calls, Bubba, there haven't been a lot of successful calls for the Tiger Cats this year, but the Stephen Dunbar one-handed grab was pretty impressive. Seth Small, the 22-year-old kicker, hitting the 58-yard field goal, which we all thought at the time was going to be the game-winning field goal against Montreal, and David Cote comes back and wins it for Montreal. But and that's the longest field goal in the league so far. And the other one was against Montreal. Really odd finish when Stavros Katsantonis got the roughing the passer on Trevor Harris. They were on the Hamilton 8-yard line. if they put the ball in the end zone, they were going to win the football game. The injury spotter pulled Trevor Harris out of that game, and Dominic Davis had to come in, threw a pass. It was intercepted by Cam Kelly. Game over, but Harris was on such a roll. You kind of felt that one slipping for the Tiger Cats too. But there have been a few highlights, and I'm optimistic in this final third of the season that there'll be some more for the Tiger Cats.
I got to admit, from the guy who's over in the booth beside you, your call there for the small field goal, which I think, and we all know small is so accurate from 40 yards in, and the fact that they brought in the punter, Domagala, who had the stronger leg to kick that field goal, and then they pulled him out and put Small in, and he drills it in there from 58. I think we all kind of lost it, and your call was fantastic. Moj, you got something there?
Hey, Ballsy, back me up on this. The Dunbar catch was not a catch. It hits the turf. You can see it on the replay.
What?
Hey,
Give it
it's
to
in the
RJ.
stats.
Give it to RJ. He hasn't had too many. I'll tell you what, that is one thing behind the scenes that's an art. And I haven't had to do too many of like the Riders defense has not soiled the sheets in probably 4 years. They probably literally soiled the sheets because they were sick, and then they look sick against Winnipeg. But to try to polish a turd, sorry for the number 2 talk, to try to polish a turd is very hard as a play-by-play guy. Sometimes you need to have that chemistry with your color guy. You got to figure some other things to talk about. Moj, I've said, I'm glad I'm not a BC Lions broadcaster this year, because I would have lost my voice by the first quarter with how exciting things have gone. I'm not as professional as you two do.
Hey, you know what we do as soon as the game gets out of hand? We start talking about food, right? I mean, you got Julio in the booth. That's what the focus starts shifting into food or just other things like that. So, yeah, you're right sometimes. And trust me, we went through the Devon Claybrooks area. We talked about food a lot that season. Yeah, sometimes you just kind of got to deviate and try to make it entertaining for the fans either way. But, you know, when you have as you guys know, when you have a good football team and you have an entertaining game, it makes our job a lot easier.
Hey, here's a quirky stat, Bubba, if I could jump in.
Yeah.
The Montreal Alouettes have beaten all Western teams except for Calgary's the only Western team they haven't beaten. What is going on? It's like Montreal sees a West team, they roll them. It's an interesting quirk to the East.
RJ, it is crazy what's coming up next week, and I think that's the great that you're taking the optimistic attitude there for the Bombers, because the Ticats certainly need a win to join the likes of these other two teams and maybe even get into the playoffs. RJ, where do we find you during the week?
Well, I'll be doing Ticats this week with Luke Tasker, my partner on the broadcasts. We will have a podcast on the Ticats Audio Network setting up the game on Saturday. That will be out on Friday. And, of course, 4 o'clock is kickoff, Ticats and Bombers, and a lot to be sorted out this week, as Ticats fans know, as far as quarterbacks, injuries, and game plan going into this final third of the season. Ticats need wins.
Moj, where can we all find you?
Well, of course, we got the game Friday or probably Saturday in Calgary. Able Actions pregame show, I believe, starts at 3:30 Pacific time. And, of course, we kick off against the Stampeders in the afternoon. And then during the course of the week, if you want to check out some interviews, it's called the Bio Series, mojonsports.com, where we just talk to athletes, coaches, celebs, and just talk to them about their life story. So they're evergreens, as we call them in the business, so it doesn't matter when you log in and take a look at them. But we also have that, and we're going to get that rolling again now in the fall as well, because we took the summer off to enjoy the summer.
Balls, you have to admit, I thank God for some of these apps we have on our cell phones that I can start to listen to more broadcasts from around the nation. And you are just going crazy in the afternoon on the sports cage. I love it. It's spectacular.
Yeah, we 4 to 6:30 Saskatchewan time. You see the sports cage. Thanks for that, Bubba. And yeah, just doing the Rider games. And my girlfriend is in the aesthetics business. And before I saw RJ Broadhead, she did this thing called, she takes blood from my arm and puts it in my head, PRP, to grow my hair. So when I'm done, I'm going into her chair and I'm telling her, I want to look like RJ Broadhead.
Well, that's what I did. So it works.
Oh, folks. Hey, following much needed a week off for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, are back to work, and they welcome the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on Saturday. All week, as RJ talked about, we'll have coverage with the Ticats, Today, the Coach O Show, Morielli and Hitchcock talking about the old days, all leading up to this massive Grey Cup rematch ×3. Catch it all on your favorite podcast provider. YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe, as we always ask when we appreciate. This is, folks, been the CFL This Week, a lovely edition. Thank you to all three of you guys for your time. Great contributions. And again, you can catch us every 7 days, starting on Monday. This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. We'll see you in 7 days.
The CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil. Subscribe, like, and get the deepest takes on Canada's game every Monday.